All right, welcome back to the Krueg Show, everybody. Larry Krueger, bright and early. Well, 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, but we were up late last night doing basketball, baseball, post-game, talking Warrior basketball. Warriors win at 109-100 and take a commanding 3-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals over the Dallas Mavericks. And Grant Napear is back with us to talk a little NBA basketball on this Monday. Hey, Grant, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, Larry. Man, what a weekend. We had enough going on with the NBA, the PGA, hockey. I mean, I never left my condo. I never walked outside, man.
Exactly. It was an incredible weekend. I mean, then we have locally baseball. Giants got swept by the Padres, so it was kind of an ugly weekend for the Giants. But yeah, NBA, NHL, PGA Tour, you name it, the sports. This is a great time of year. Yeah. Let's get right to last night's Warrior game because I think a lot of people expected the Mavericks to bounce back in a huge way after showing some fight in the first couple games. I thought, man, as the series shifts to Dallas, a lot of people thought, man, Dallas is going to get one. And instead, Golden State beats them 109-100. Yep. And it looks like we are headed towards the gentleman's sweep where you win 3 in a row. Maybe that fourth one goes to Dallas and we go on and watch the Warriors clinch it in Game 5 on their home court. What'd you think last night?
Well, a couple of things. When Dallas played as well as they did in Game 2 and lost, I said the series is over. All right. When you play that well and you have that big of a lead and everything's hitting on all cylinders and you end up losing that game, that to me is when the series was over. Listen, the bench of Golden State has been superior in this series. Dallas is feast or famine with their threes, and when they're not making threes, they've shown you they really can't do anything else. And as good as Luka is offensively, and he's great, he's really not that good defensively. And I think the Warriors have been really abusing him. I think they've been attacking him. I think they've been making life very difficult for him on that end of the floor. But we've been saying this now for a couple of weeks. When the Warriors have their core players playing at an A level, like Steph Curry, who started off slowly, coming off the bench in the series against Denver and got better and better and better, he's now Steph Curry, right? He's vintage Steph Curry. And unless the Warriors have significant injuries, especially with what's going on in the East, and I know we'll get there in a moment, but the Warriors are primed right now to win another championship.
You know, it's almost as if, Grant, they feel like that they need to dispatch of the Mavericks early to have their best shot at the title. I feel like they're, in a way, the Warriors kind of announced that they are locked in right now.
Yep.
And I think they know that if they can sweep Dallas or if they can beat them in 5 and the Eastern Conference Finals does go 7 and Golden State gets 3 or 4 extra days, that those 3 or 4 extra days may be beneficial to them.
Not only is it beneficial to them, but you're looking at what's going on in the Miami-Boston series, as you're pointing out. Tyler Hero's not playing tonight, out with a groin. Butler's going to play. Lowry's going to try to play. But this is only in Game 4. And Larry, I still think this series is going 7 games with Miami and Boston. And in all likelihood, the team that emerges from that long series is going to be very fatigued. Attrition is going to play a part in these playoffs. So I think the Warriors right now, if they can end this in 4, and if they don't, Larry, they're going to end it in 5. They're going to be in a really nice position to take whoever they are, whether it's Miami or Boston, those teams are not going to be fresh.
It's funny. We were doing a little, having a little fun yesterday. I had my kids' JV baseball party, so I during the beginning of the game. So I was there and then watching the game. But Ryan, who we just talked to, our young producer, and Dan Coach Emilio, who's one of our sponsors and is a guy who's on our post-game show, they decided they were going to do a live watch party of Warriors Mavericks. And so they're going back and forth. And then all of a sudden gets to the Wiggins dunk. And Dan's like, pass over here. He's doing like minor league play-by-play on this watch party. And then he goes crazy and his voice goes, breaks octaves. And he's now, his voice breaks up. And it was a hilarious thing to hear. But as a professional announcer, and Dave Fleming had this moment, Edgar Renteria hit the 3-run bomb in the 8th inning at Texas in the 2010 World Series. And Dave's like, it is gone. And then he kind of lost his pitch of his voice, and it kind of cracked. Do you have, you have great pipes, but do you have a moment where, where at any point your voice gave out on you, and all of a sudden you went to like some higher pitch because of just pure excitement in the moment?
Fortunately, I've never had that moment where my voice has left me. And generally speaking, the best moments come at the end of games. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. And by then, your voice has been warmed up, and it's at the strongest point, really. And doing TV play-by-play is a lot different than doing radio. There are times when I've done radio where I've had to pace myself at the end of a hockey game, I did the NBA for 3 years on radio. And there are times in an end-to-end action, and this is when I was working with an analyst, where you do have to kind of say, okay, wait a minute. I've got another 2 quarters left here, and I've got to make sure that my voice is good in the final couple of minutes of the game. So there are times, yes, on radio where you do have to say, wow, okay, I'm going a little overboard here. I got to pace myself. TV, that doesn't really happen because you're not really stretching. You're not really taxing your voice on TV as much as you are on radio.
What do you think of the Wiggins jam? I mean, it was an unbelievable posterizing of, Wiggins. To me, I love this element of Wiggins' game when he doesn't shoot the 3, when he's not passive, when he attacks the front of the rim and tries to finish with authority. I think that he still has unbelievable hops, even though he's got mileage on those legs in the NBA. I thought it was a fantastic career, maybe the greatest play of his career when you factor in the circumstances.
And I love what Luka had to say after the game. Luka gave him major props and even, acknowledged that was a great dunk. And you don't normally hear that from the opposition after a playoff loss. So it was definitely one of those, if you don't like that moments, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't like that, you don't like Warrior basketball. Okay, it's funny. And there are certain guys that get headlines and highlights. And obviously on this Warrior team, it's Steph Curry, it's Klay Thompson, it's Draymond Green. And then we just described, there's Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole. The guy who just kind of is like really quietly just a damn good basketball player, and there's just no other way to say it, is Kevon Looney. Yep. And Looney has just played, tremendous ball. He's really been a great Warrior all the way through. But now he's at a point in his career where he still is young, but he's got playoff experience. And Grant, I thought, just watching him the last couple nights or last couple games, this guy makes great basketball play after great basketball play. He's selfless. He does all the dirty work. He's in some ways the perfect component at the center spot to run with this Warrior group. He kept, I would say, I just watched it a second time last night. I would say he kept a dozen possessions where he tipped it or had the right positioning or made the right pass or finished at the rim. I mean, the guy is playing at a crazy level. I mean, it's amazing watching him right now.
And Steve Kerr is coaching him perfectly. I mean, the rotations, Kerr's doing a magnificent job. We don't talk about that as much because people say, well, they got all the good players. Yeah, but, Kerr has just done a masterful job, in my opinion, with this. What did people say about Kevon Looney? Well, he's not going to be able to play against a Mavs small lineup. And yeah, really? I mean, he has been a difference maker. And we keep on talking about this. We talked about this in Denver. I thought the experience would be the factor. And then we talked about Memphis. I said the experience. Well, what else is the factor now is the depth of Golden State. You and I took I think it was a text last week where you were talking about the Warriors bench and someone said, what are you talking about? The Warriors bench isn't that good. And we were like, what are you talking about?
Deepest team, maybe the deepest team in the league right now.
Right. They said the same thing about Phoenix, the Phoenix bench. And we're like, wait a minute, they won 64 games. The Warriors just have a solid basketball team. Yeah, it's Curry. Yeah, it's Thompson. Yeah, it's Green. But you just mentioned Poole. You talk about Looney. You talk about Wiggins. I mean, Larry, without even knowing who's going to come out of the East right now, what all right, without even knowing whether it's going to be Boston or Miami. And let's just assume for a moment that the players are going to be able to play and not hurt. I'm not taking either of those teams to beat Golden State, are you?
No. No. I mean, and then here's the thing. There's a reality, whether you're starting now or on the bench now, you know, if you're a basketball person, you know the difference between a quote unquote starting player and a quote unquote bench player. Let's look at the Warriors and the Mavericks. Green, Wiggins, Looney, Curry, Thompson. Those are your starters. So they're all starters. Otto Porter's a starter. Jordan Poole's a starter. Moses Moody is young, but he's a starter. Same with Jonathan Kuminga. The only bench players they have on this team right now are Toscano Anderson, Bielitsa, and Bielitsa was very good in Sacramento, by the way, and Damian Lee. The rest of the team are literally starters. Now let's look at the Mavericks. They have Luka, who's an obvious starter. I would say Brunson has emerged as a starter, but he was a second-round pick, right, or at least a late first. Is Powell a starter? Is Bullock a starter? Is Dorian Finney-Smith a starter? Then let's go to their bench. Kleber, Bertans. Bertans, you could argue, used to be a starter. Dinwiddie is a starter. So they've got one starter. So realistically, I think if you looked at the Mavericks and you went right down their roster, their starting players are Doncic, Brunson, and Dinwiddie. They have 3 starting players. And the Warriors have 8, 9. I mean, it's pretty dramatic, really, if you look at it.
And you know what's amazing, based on what you just said, running down that Mavericks roster? How the hell did they beat Phoenix? Seriously. How?
That was more about Phoenix, don't you think?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, Phoenix worked all year to get the number 1 seed, to have home court, and they have it for the biggest game of the year, and they're a no-show. I mean, how does that happen? But you're right about Dallas. You're right. Listen, again, we talked about this before the series started. I actually thought Dallas would win 2 games. You thought Dallas would win 1 game. But we both thought the Warriors would win this series. It looks like it's going to be 4 games. But when you put the Warriors roster here, the Mavericks roster here, you're like, there's no way Golden State's going to lose this series unless Curry gets hurt or unless, you know, they have a couple of injuries. That's the only way.
What do you make of all the really, quality, basketball people out there who had Mavericks in 5?
I don't understand how anyone could pick the Mavericks. Again, when you put their roster next to the Warriors roster with a team that's won championships, a team that's, again, I didn't like the way Golden State played in games 4, 5, and 6 against Memphis. I said that. But what I did say, and I think, I'm not saying anything you didn't know or our fans that are watching, if the Warriors play their A game, which they've done, they're not going to lose. The Warriors A game is better by, in my opinion, a mile than the Mavericks A game. You take the Mavericks A game against the Warriors A game, the Warriors are going to win 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, no, it's incredible to watch right now, to see Golden State locked in, and it's amazing. The Ringer, which is a pretty reputable deal, they did a thing going into the Western Conference Finals and in the conference finals in both East and West, and said, here are the teams, and these are their best chance. These teams have the best chances and the worst chances to win the title. Best chance, Boston. Second best chance, Miami. Third best chance, Dallas. Fourth best chance, Golden State.
Now, I don't get it.
Not a great weekend for the Ringer.
No, you and I did this before the Final Four started, and you and I both had Dallas 4th on our list. We both had Dallas, and I believe we both at that time had Boston 1st. We had Golden State 2nd, Miami 3rd, and Dallas 4th. Okay, I don't know how anyone could look at those 4 teams. See, here's what I think happened. I think people, when you got past round 2, I think people got so caught up and were so infatuated with how Luka played in Game 7 on the road against Phoenix. They're like, oh, Luka's going to take this team to the finals. Oh, Luka this, Luka that. And Luka's great. But Luka's one person. And one person is not going to beat the Golden State Warriors. That's what happened. I think people got too infatuated with Luka on how he disposed of Phoenix in that Game 7. And I get that, but you got to use your head once in a while.
My buddy Jim Molay in the chat says the Ringer doesn't have the benefit of the Krueg show. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for that, Jimmy. Bill Simmons, by the way, runs the Ringer. Not a good weekend for Bill Simmons then. Well, Dallas, let's talk before we move to the East. Dallas is the ultimate donut team. I mean, what do they have? They got Powell in the middle. But what a nightmarish day for Bullock. I mean, Bullock got the cut in the eye in the last game, and now he's dinged up. He's physically not right. night. He was out there running around less than 100%, but 0 for 10, 0 for 7 from 3. Grant, you can make a really compelling argument that Kleber and Bullock shooting 0 for 12 from 3 shot Dallas out of game 3.
Absolutely. Well, when Dallas is not making their threes, how else are they going to beat you?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the Warriors can beat you when they're not making their threes. They can. Dallas can't, and we've seen that already in this series. So, even if Dallas is able to regroup somehow and pull it together for one win, which I right now don't like their chances.
Really, even in I think it's the gentleman's sweep where they'll get some kind of very one-sided route. Warriors will call off the dogs, mid-second quarter. Dallas will get a convincing win. Their fans will leave the arena. Everybody will be happy, and then Golden State finishes them at home. That's what
maybe. I mean, you picked that'd be good for you. You picked the Warriors in 5, so
that's what I envisioned. By the way, 3 in a row. The game 4 loss, win at home.
If that's the scenario, we know that Golden State's going to win a game 5 at home. I mean, the chances of them going home and not closing out this series would be incredible. But I don't know. Dallas, again, I go back to game 2, Larry. Dallas played as well as they can play, right? The first quarter, the first half. I mean, the game was theirs. That's the best they can play and to lose. I just think, Larry, that is demoralizing when you hit on all cylinders for as long as they did in that game and lose. I don't know how you get off the mat after that. And they didn't yesterday.
Is there an adjustment that Kidd either can make or should have made that he didn't make? How much of this is on Kidd? How much of this is just the Warriors have more talent?
The Warriors are a better team. I mean, we all try to overanalyze this, and that's our job. But, the better team in a 7-game series is supposed to win. The Warriors are a better team. I just don't know how on earth you can look at this series, put the rosters next to each other, and don't come away with a conclusion the Warriors are a significantly better team. And you talked a lot before this series started about what happened in the regular season this year and last year. But again, the Warriors have not been the right team in the regular season. They've had Klay Thompson was out. Curry was in and out of the lineup. Green. Again, when the Warriors have their players healthy and on the floor playing, who's going to beat them? I mean, that's the reality. And when Steph Curry plays the way he did yesterday, which is pretty much a every game occurrence, the Warriors are going to be hard to beat. You're going to beat that team 4 times? I mean, think about that. You can beat the Warriors once. You can beat them twice. Memphis proved that. You're going to really beat the Warriors 4? You're going to beat Steph Curry 4 times? Nah, I don't think so.
Let's jump to the East. Miami's got a 2-1 series lead. They play game 4 tonight in Boston. I was shocked by game 3.
I was
too. People who missed game 3 on Saturday, Miami rolled into Boston and beat them 109-103, held Boston to 18 points in the first quarter, just went there and took it in the first. It was 39-18 Heat at the end of the first quarter, and they never looked back. There's the Heat have just a lot of tough guys. That's a tough team.
Yep.
Tucker's a tough guy, I think. Jimmy Butler's pretty tough.
Yep.
Adebayo, Kyle Lowry's, I think, one of the toughest players in the entire league. And then they do have a pretty nice bench. I mean, Duncan Robinson does nothing for them. He's making $70 million. They got Oladipo. They've got Tyler Hero. The kid Strus in the backcourt, can shoot it. This is a pretty good basketball team. Obviously, very well coached. Where are you with Boston, Miami? I mean, I like Boston. I think I still like Boston actually to come back. But man, Miami showed incredible will to go into Boston, which is a cauldron, and just basically turn off their faucet. And they did it the only way that you can do it from the opening tip before people were even in their seats. They took it right then and there, didn't let the crowd get into it and build this to this crescendo. I thought that was a big key.
I'll tell you what else was a big key was Bam Adebayo, who really did nothing offensively in the first 2 games. It was kind of like when you were talking about Memphis and Dillon Brooks, you were like, man, what the hell's happened to Dillon Brooks? And, I was looking at that with Bam Adebayo after the first couple games. I'm like, wait a minute, they're going to really need him. And think about that. When Butler hurts his knee and leaves the game, I mean, Bam Adebayo was unstoppable. That was, to me, the difference in the game. Incredible how Miami started that game, Larry. All right. Amazing how Miami started that game on the road after what happened to them in game 2. Now, think about this. Game 4 tonight, no Tyler Hero. So I want to ask you this question. We know Butler's got the knee. We know that Kyle Lowry's dealing with a hamstring. And I know you should not concede games in the NBA playoffs. So I'm going to put you as the general manager. I'm going to put you as Eric Riley and Eric Spoelstra. Would you not just sit out Butler and Lowry tonight since Hero can't play and get these guys as fresh as you can for a best-of-3 series with you having 2 games at home?
I wouldn't sit him out, but what I would do is I'd be ready to pull the ripcord and abandon the plan. Let's say mid-second quarter if it wasn't going my way. I'd pack it in. I'd pack it in before I would suit them up and absolutely play them, but I wouldn't make them go for if I wouldn't. I'm not going to beat my head against a wall trying to make something happen. That's not going to happen. But I don't know that it's the playoffs. I don't know that I want to. Give it, it's not, if in the regular season, yeah, I do what you want, but in the playoffs, yeah. I suit my guys up and take my chances, because what if you get one guy who starts raining down threes and what if Oladipo got hot and dialed it back to a couple years ago, or the Heat have a number of different guys who could get hot in an instant and then kind of carry you, and then you'd feel like you blew it by sitting guys. I don't know.
All right, and I think that's a great point. I look at it. In the conference finals, you don't see coaches conceding games. So I get that. But Miami's best chance of winning this series is to have Jimmy Butler on the floor every game. Now I know that they got by when he got hurt in game 3, but that's not going to happen very often. And, I'm not in the trainer's room. You're not. I don't really know what the real story is on Butler. I don't know if it's just, pain tolerance. I don't know if it's mobility. I don't know what it is. But the worst thing to me for Miami tonight would be to log a lot of minutes for Lowry and Butler and lose by 1 or 2 points, be all, fatigued, tired, be still worrying about the knee of Butler, the hamstring of Lowry, and then really having to come home and win that game 5 on your home floor. So I like your idea better than mine. Yeah, I like your idea. No, I like your idea better than mine. Start them. If the game gets out of hand, boom, you're coming out. We're going to go to our reserves.
Yeah, because we saw the Warriors do that in what round was it, where they were getting destroyed and they just kind of said, all right, we'll pack it in and go to the next game. I think also Boston needs some points off. They need more off the bench than what they got in game 3. They got 10 from Grant Williams. That's not enough.
Nope.
And I don't know who else has got to step up. Maybe the guy that I really like and taking big shots for them off the bench is Pritchard, because it seems like he's has risen to the moment, so to speak. But that's my one concern with Boston is, Miami's a little deeper in some ways. Martin, Hero, Oladipo, Vincent, Dedmon. They got some Duncan Robinson. They've got some guys they can go to off their bench, where Boston doesn't. Boston starters with Tatum and Smart and Brown, Horford dialing it back to 5 years ago. I think Boston is the better starting 5, but I think maybe the Heat have the better roster 1 through 15.
You're probably right. But in the playoffs, what generally happens is your stars win the games, right? So we know Tatum is the guy. He got his shoulder, but he's going to be fine. He's playing tonight. We know we saw what Smart did in the bounce back after missing game 1 and game 2. Brown is Brown. Let's face it. Boston needs those guys playing at an A level to win games. And if they do, I think they still win this series. If they don't, I'm with you. I could see Miami winning. But I did not expect what happened in game 3. I didn't think there was any way Miami could go in there and dictate the physicality and the way they played that game in Boston after what happened in game 2. That just shows you the makeup of the Miami. Think about that. They got embarrassed in game 2. They were awful, and they have 48 hours to kind of pull them up by the socks and get ready for the game. And not only did they get ready, they came right out and dictated everything in that first quarter. I was very impressed by that.
I really think that Golden State is keenly aware, by the way, that their chances go way, way, way up if they get extra rest.
Yes.
And so I do think they're coming out with this, like, we're not wasting any time. They're looking at the East the way that we're looking at the East. I think they think it's going to go 7. Who do you think gives Golden State the better series, or who's the tougher team for Golden State to beat, do you think? Because a lot of this is about matchups.
Matchups.
Yeah, is it Miami or is it the Celtics?
If both teams are healthy, I think it's Boston just because of what Marcus Smart can do defensively. Now, you would say, well, what about Jimmy Butler from Miami? Similar, but to me, in the finals, lots of time off between games, the stars are going to dictate who wins. And to me, the stars of Boston are better than the stars of Miami, even though Miami may have a deeper team. So I'm looking at this from Boston. Now, I'm kind of going against what I said when we started doing this show before the playoffs began. I kept on saying, don't discredit Miami. Don't discredit Miami. Nobody's been talking about Miami, even in the early part of the playoffs. And I'm like, hey, Miami's good. Miami's good. And so I'm kind of going, against what I said at the beginning of the playoffs. But you make a good point. Miami is very deep. I'll tell you, they are very well coached. I mean, Eric Spoelstra is a hell of a coach. I don't know if he gets enough credit. He is a hell of a coach. Miami knows how to play. And, Vlade Divac used to tell me this all the time. Vlade would say, don't ever get too high after a win and don't get too low after a loss. When Robert Horry, hit that shot, all right, to beat the Kings in Game 4 in the 2002 Western Conference Finals, I walked in to the locker room about 20 minutes after the game. And you could hear a pin drop in there. And the guys were still all sitting down and they had their heads down. And Vlade walks right up to me. And I told the guys, don't worry about it. We're going to go home and win Game 5. Forget about it. And that was I was thinking, wow. But, Vlade always said that. Don't get too high after a win. Don't get too low after a loss. I think Miami does that very well. They just bounce back very well after a bad game.
Very resilient basketball team. On that Horry play, who was it that batted the ball out there?
Vlade.
It was Vlade.
Vlade did, yeah. I mean, and here's the other thing. What's Robert Horry doing out there? It's a drive to the basket. You would think he's in there trying to get an offensive rebound for a putback. He's the only guy out on the perimeter, and Vlade just wanted to bat the ball, take time off the clock, and wouldn't you know it, Robert Horry is standing right freaking there. He didn't even have to move.
Yeah. Last night there was a conversation in the pregame had between one of the officials doing the Warrior Mavs game, and I believe it was Spencer Brown. I'm not sure which Miami player it was, but basically he's looking at the Mavericks. They're all in their blue warm-ups. They're dribbling around, and we get this live interaction. It was really interesting. I don't know if you caught this, but
I didn't see that.
You didn't see this? So the ref goes up to, I think it was Spencer Brown. If I'm not, somebody can correct me. But it was either Spencer Brown, might have been Green for Dallas. And he said, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you change your shirt? And he had a white shirt on. And the game before, Steph Curry had thrown an errant pass right at the Mavericks bench because they wear blue warm-ups, blue. Warriors are in their white jerseys. All of a sudden, there's one guy wearing white, and he's standing right there. Yep. Curry catches him out of his peripheral, throws him a pass. His actual offensive teammate was about 10 feet to the left of the player. So so GTC Reels is saying it was Tim Hardaway. I don't think it was Tim Hardaway, but it could have been. But it was a Dallas Maverick. And he said, hey, could you take your shirt off and change your shirt from white to blue? And the guy's like, why? And he's like, I'll the ref goes like, I'll buy it for you. I'll buy you a new shirt. And so they have this conversation, and then the player says, all right. And they kind of joke about it. And then the ref was clearly serious. I don't know if he was serious about buying the shirt, but he was serious about, could you put something else on? And the player blew him off and then stood there on, and was on the bench all night with the white shirt. Do you think a new rule is coming where you have to wear either a warm up on the bench or at least the same color as your team on the bench?
Absolutely.
Because it's the NBA. It's unlike baseball. It's unlike football. You don't have wide receivers running around wearing colored jerseys and fans sitting right there where the quarterback could think, oh, that's not my receiver, that's a fan, or that's not my a fan, that's a receiver. Your peripheral vision, these guys do depend on their peripheral vision. They can't look over, see who's there, then start to make the pass. Guys are going to break on that, so they start making the pass and they see the color, and they just all of a sudden that was a turnover. That could have been a turnover in the key sequence that ultimately could have decided a finals game. That would be kind of embarrassing. But do you think we're headed towards a rule change there?
And you
think it's fair? Think it's right?
I think it is right. I don't think that you should be able to sit on the bench wearing the same color shirt as the team you're playing against. It makes perfect sense to me. Yes, and I'm surprised that we're even having this discussion, meaning that I'm surprised that that isn't a rule already. To me, that goes into common sense 101, right? I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, I don't understand that. So, yes, I do think that there will be a new rule as far as you have to be on the bench wearing the same color jersey warm up as your team. Absolutely. Yes.
A couple last things with Grant before we say goodbye. One, I saw that Dwight Howard is going to stay at Michigan, and he has declined the Lakers' interest in Howard. Yeah, or Juwan Howard. Did I say Dwight Howard? Yeah, Juwan Howard. Juwan Howard is going to stay at Michigan and is not going to take his name out of the running for the Laker gig. There's a lot of speculation. People asking Woj, what about Mark Jackson? What about Mark Jackson? It's amazing. Mark Jackson, I don't know if it's because he's a New Yorker and there's so many New Yorkers, but he seems like there's always somebody saying, hey, what about Mark? What do you think of Mark? And yet Mark he doesn't get a lot of looks. He took the Warriors from a nothing team to a 50-win team. Yep. Then Kerr took over and immediately jumped to 67 wins. And maybe that's it. Maybe people around basketball don't look at Mark as helping the Warriors as much as maybe keeping them from winning more games, because of the talent. I don't necessarily agree with it either. They were at a different stage, but
that's right.
What do you think of Mark, and who do you think ultimately, will be that Laker coach? And it sounds like LeBron's not part of this, which surprises a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things on Mark Jackson. The Warriors weren't ready when he coached the team that went over 60 games, all right, because of the developmental stage that they were in with Steph Curry and everything. So I think that's unfair on Mark Jackson. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, the lack of communication, the, alleged rift with everyone. I don't know. I do think that the longer that Mark Jackson stays on the sidelines, the more difficult it's going to become for him to become an NBA head coach again. He was in the final two with Sacramento with Mike Brown. We heard the reports by Mark Stein and others that the Kings owner, Vivek Ranadive, loved Mark Jackson. So what that tells me is if it doesn't work out for Mike Brown and Mark Jackson is still not an NBA head coach, he'll be the next head coach of the Sacramento Kings following Brown. As far as the Lakers go, Larry, I will tell you, I find it near impossible to believe that LeBron James is not involved in the hiring process. Now, I'm not saying he has the final say, but I really find it hard to digest that the Lakers would hire a coach that LeBron James is not 100% behind. I don't know who that individual is going to be, but again, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think LeBron will have a say in who the next head coach is.
When Red Auerbach used to light up the cigar on the bench, well before my time, before your time as well, that was the ultimate talking trash moment back there. That was, you could say that was the beginning of trash talk, right? It was like, I mean, is there anything more insulting than having assistant coach lighting your cigar and you're blowing this flame up and I'm smoking my cigar. Red's lit his cigar, everybody. This thing's over. Curry is doing this night thing. And a lot of people are saying that it's trash talk and that it's not becoming this and that. Where do you weigh in on trash talk in the NBA? Is there a place for it? Did Red basically, once he lit up the cigar, anything goes, and Curry's night thing is fine? Or if you're on the other end of the night, are you suddenly irate?
Nobody talked more trash than Gary Payton or Larry Bird. I mean, it went on all the time. I used to hear it. I used to hear it while I was sitting courtside announcing games. I mean, literally I would sometimes go like this so I could hear it better when the players were at the foul line and stuff. You wouldn't believe the stuff that was being said. So I think it's like, come on, really? We're worried about, this. I mean, it's, to me, not a big deal. Trash talking has always gone on in the NBA. Again, I started doing the games in 1988 with Magic and all of those guys. And I mean, it went on and it's still going to go on. Maybe it's done in a different form now. Maybe instead of using your mouth, you're going to use, hand gestures or what have you. But I think people need to worry about more important things than what Steph Curry is doing. I don't think it's a big deal. I really don't.
It's funny. Tolbert told me one time that Bird, the Warriors were playing the Celtics, and Bird came out and said to Tom something like, something like Tom came out to guard Bird, and Bird's like, "You going to guard me with a white guy? You guard me with this white guy?" Where do you put this Warrior dynasty up against the dynasties of our lifetime?
Okay, well, you'd have
if they can finish it, they can finish this deal here.
Okay, our lifetime?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the Lakers, right? We're talking
about the Lakers.
We're talking about the Celtics. All right. In my opinion, the Spurs were a dynasty. They won 5 championships. Do you agree?
Bulls. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I was going to say the Bulls. They won 6. That's a dynasty. I mean,
Celtics of the 80s. Do you put them in there?
I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, because to me, the Celtics and the Lakers
it was almost like a dual monarchy there.
Yeah, exactly. So I put them up there. If the Warriors win a championship this year, I think they are in the conversation. Now, do I think that I could put them ahead of the Bulls with Michael in 6? No. The one blemish, as we know, is blowing that 3-1 lead to Cleveland, which I blame on Draymond Green for getting suspended in Game 5. There's no way, in my opinion, they go home up 3-1 and lose that Game 5 and then lose the series. But they're in the conversation, Larry, and they are a dynasty. No one can say, well, they're not a dynasty because in the last 2 years they didn't do this or they didn't do that. You can say, well, gee, what happened against Toronto? Well, Durant got hurt. I mean, there are some blemishes along the way. Cleveland, Toronto, but to me, they're in the conversation. I don't have them ahead of the Bulls. I don't know, Larry, if I could put them ahead of the Showtime Lakers. I don't know about you. I don't know if I could put them ahead of the 80 Lakers. The Spurs are an interesting look. Would you put the Spurs 5 championships if the Warriors win this year? Where do you rank the Spurs in that era? Robinson leading into Tim Duncan and everything. Where do you rank that compared to the Warriors?
Well, it's hard because, the Warriors have had the best of the teams. Like the best of the Warriors was better than the best of the Spurs because the best of the Warriors had Durant in his prime. So in some ways, you could say the Warriors at their apex were better than the Spurs at theirs. And it's hard not to use that as the measuring stick, right? Whose team ultimately got to a higher level. Right. Then you can count out titles, and there's that as well. But Golden State had 5 straight trips to the finals. And in my opinion, they're a bogus Draymond Green call suspension away from four rings instead of 3. So I don't know where to me, I'm biased on this one. I watched, I'm a Warrior fan from the 70s. So I watched, decades of bad ball, and I'm just basking in this. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask, to be honest.
To me, the Celtics, obviously in the 50s and, leading through that decade, I think is the best dynasty in the history of the game. I mean, obviously, they won every single year, right? You have the Bulls, now we're talking about our lifetime. 6 for 6 is pretty damn good. They obviously the 2 years that Michael was playing baseball, but you can't really top that, can you? 6 for 6.
Right. No, you can't.
Right. So
and the thing about the Bulls, when I think of the Bulls, I think of the Harper, Jordan, Pippen, Rodman Bulls and how they suffocated teams. I think that was the 72 win team, right? Wasn't it? The team so. that had I thought Harper was like the underrated guy there. Why? Because he was a 6'5", 6'6" guy playing the point next to Jordan and Pippen and Rodman, and they literally would just squeeze all the lanes, and you just had nowhere to go. They were an incredible defensive team with almost unmatched length and athleticism on the perimeter.
And they defended the hell out of you because you talked about Rodman, and Michael Jordan was arguably the best defender in basketball every single year. You talked about Harper. They could just shut you down, and they did. And they suffocated teams. Thank you. And when they needed a stop, when they absolutely had to get a stop, they got a stop. And that's what made them so great. So again, I think the Warriors. And here's the other deal. You and I talked about this before the playoffs started. I think there was a rumor about Kerr and maybe not coming back, and I said, why wouldn't he come back? If we were saying if this team wins the championship, why would he walk away? This team is still, even if I don't even know what the offseason would be like. If they win a championship this year, and even if they don't and lose in the finals, they're still going to be one of the the top favorites next year before the season begins. Why would Kerr walk away from that? Makes no sense to me.
It's a great point. It kind of leads into my next question. This is an article that Ramona Shelburne wrote today on ESPN.com. She says, according to ESPN stats and information, the Warriors have outscored the Mavericks by 10.3 points per game in the third quarter in this series. That is on pace to be the best such differential in any series under Steve Kerr, better than the 9.7 points they outscored the Rockets by in the third quarter of the 2018 conference finals. We saw Kerr go out with COVID, and Mike Brown, I don't know if it was Mike Brown struggled or if the Warriors struggled. It's really hard to say, but the Warriors didn't get great results. Now Kerr's back, and they're playing at an exceptionally high level, and you're seeing it in the third quarter, which if there is a quarter that the coach gets in the NBA, it's you go in at the break, you talk to your team, you make some adjustments. That third quarter is a lot about your coaching staff and the imprint that you made on your players and the adjustments that you made at halftime. So a lot of people look to the third quarter as the coaching quarter. What do you think of Kerr? Is this one of his greatest coaching efforts?
I think Kerr is a great coach, and I know people say, well, anybody could coach that team. That's nonsense. I've always been a huge Steve Kerr fan. I do think it's one of his best coaching jobs. And here's something else that I just thought about. Tell me how you feel about this. Mike Brown knows what Steve Kerr is going to do. I mean, I'm sure they've talked about that. And so you're a lot closer to the situation with Golden State than I am. But assuming that Steve Kerr was going to step down this year, don't you think that Mike Brown would have been the leading candidate to take over? And if that was the case, and I'm not saying it is, I'm asking, for sake of conversation, assuming that it was, wouldn't Steve Kerr have said, hey, don't go to the Sacramento job. This is it for me. And you're going to be replacing me next year. I mean, you'd much rather coach the Warriors than the Kings. So do you believe any of that could have gone on behind the scenes?
I think he would have been on the very, very short list, Mike Brown. I don't know that it would be like a fait accompli that he would get it. Okay. But I think he would be on the short list, and he's definitely put in the time, and he's built the relationships and the trust. I think if Kerr were on the verge of hanging it up, I don't think Mike Brown takes that Kings job.
I agree. That's my point.
That being said, though, I thought people took, stupid and easy drive-bys on Mike Brown. Like, will Vivek pull his offer? I mean, come on, people. Yeah, stupid stuff. And people,
he had already signed his deal before he coached the games.
But I mean, just the notion of that one game is, just because it's high profile, suddenly that would,
it was Stephen A. Smith brought. That's why, because Stephen A. Smith said that on First Take that Mike Brown is the luckiest man in the NBA after what happened in Game 5. He went on First Take the next day and said Mike Brown is the luckiest guy in the NBA. And he said had he not signed his deal with Sacramento, the Kings probably would not have hired him. And I will tell you, as crazy as that may sound, I believe there's a lot of truth to that because I know how the organization runs. So I could see that happening, but it's asinine. It's stupidity. You're gonna judge a man based on 8 quarters of basketball? Are we really having this conversation? Come on.
It's crazy. Here's one other question. If you're building a team, watching Golden State have success, now Looney is a center, so they have a legitimate center. But like Dallas is in the conference finals, they have no center. I mean, Dwight Powell's not really, what's Dwight Powell? Would you rather build a team that was centerless and have that flexibility to kind of play small, or would you rather have that established center, who's going to be like, if you take DeAndre Ayton off the floor, and I wonder sometimes about why things went south in Phoenix. Is it because with the league going small that there were times that Monty Williams maybe took Ayton off the floor and Ayton's like, hey, why are you taking me off the floor? I don't know that that's the reason for their discontent or his discontent there, but something wasn't right with the big guy and his attitude and maybe what they asked him to do. Would you rather build the fast team that's sleek and versatile and multiple and you can change parts, or do you want that, even though it's 2022, and it's not the 80s, do you still want the big man in the middle?
Well, it's a fabulous question. I would do the former, okay? But if you're telling me my big man is Nikola Jokic, then I'm going to take him because
you want a passing big man, you mean?
Yeah, I want to. Yes, exactly. And what he does for that team. Now, people say, Grant, what are you talking about? They haven't won. Well, look at their roster and look at all the injuries they had, without Murray, without Porter. I mean, it's unfair to blame that on Nikola Jokic. But, first of all, you talk about the man in the middle. That position has almost been removed from the game. How many players at any position do you see playing with their back to the basket on the block anymore? It's a lost art.
The last guy that I can remember doing it regularly was Zach Randolph.
There you go. And Zach dominated, and he was so good for Memphis. He was unstoppable. That's a great point that you just made. That was the last guy. So, your centers now, or your men in the middle, as you say it, your man in the middle, they're not in the middle that much. They're on the perimeter. They're doing all kinds of things. So the game has changed. Every year we used to go to the NBA league meetings in New York, and they would have all these analytics, and they would put all these graphics on the screen. And every year from about 2015 on, and I might be off by 2 or 3 years, but they would show the game moving farther and farther away from the basket, meaning shooting percentage and number of shots. And the game kept on going farther and farther away from the basket. And it's still going in that way. So, no, the game is different now. I would take the first example as opposed to the quote unquote man in the middle example. That's the way the game's played now. The game is played differently, plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I was interning for you, and the Kings had, at the time, I think, Wayman Tisdale.
Yep.
Tisdale operated on the low block.
All the time.
He would just sit there on the low block, and he was probably 6'8", but he had great footwork and great little scoop shots and little baby hooks, and he was a 6'8" post player. But then if they went to the bench, or they brought in Greg Kite, or remember back in the day, they had a number against Joe Klein, I think it was. Joe Klein they'd dump it into Joe Klein on the low box and let him go to work. And then Jim Peterson, and you name it. I mean, it's just, that's the way the game. It was an inside outside game, and it's amazing because you see big men now, they don't even establish low block position at all.
No. Yeah, we called it the thing with Tizzy. We called it the Tizzy flip. He had that beautiful finger roll. All right, so I have a question for you because you bring up an interesting topic. Let's say Shaquille O'Neal was 20 years old or 21 or whatever he was when he came out of LSU. How would you use Shaq in today's game? Or do you say, well, Shaq would be playing differently because he would have grown up in AAU where nobody plays with their back to the basket, blah, blah, blah. But why would you take such an immovable force like Shaquille O'Neal and not have him play near the basket? But again, I asked you the question. If Shaq were 21 years old and coming out of LSU, how would he be used now in the NBA?
It's a great question, because when Shaq was at LSU, they had another guy, Stanley Roberts, who really was the quintessential post big man, right? He was not mobile. I guess I would probably just use Shaq in pick and rolls and let him roll to the hoop and throw that alley-oop. It's a pretty much unstoppable play. You can, for a guy that big, as opposed to, back him down and then all of a sudden he makes a move. It really is interesting. I mean, I think of guys like James Edwards with the Bad Boys Pistons, who, James Edwards was, had a very well developed back to the basket game, and he was really hard to stop down low. So I don't know. It's funny when the Warriors dynasty, before, when they needed a bucket, when they had to have a two, what did they do? They actually posted up Sean Livingston.
Yeah.
And they let Livingston at 6'7" just shoot over the top of somebody from the low block. And that was their gotta have it thing. And so I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, now we're seeing it's an era where anybody could point guards post up, two guards post up. It's all about who's comfortable and who's worked on their footwork. So I mean, that's the thing, and that makes me the guy that I'm really eager to see transition from college to the pros. And I've been watching the Chicago pre-draft camp, and he's looking pretty good, to be honest. Is Drew Timme. Drew Timme is the Gonzaga big man.
Yep.
Is 6'10". He's 235 pounds. He's not a shot blocker. He's not a rim protector. He doesn't have a lot of vertical, but what he has are near Kevin McHale-like footwork. And when you're watching great footwork, I mean, I'm kind of watching Jordan Poole going, you know what? Jordan Poole is really tough to beat in the half court because he's got this great footwork that he's worked on. And the same thing with Jalen Brunson for Dallas. Brunson's tough to handle in the half court because he's got this great footwork. If you've got the up and under and you've got the footwork of a young Kevin McHale, I mean, I don't care if you're 6 feet or 7 feet. It can benefit you in the 80s, the 90s, even today in today's game. That footwork can get you shots in the half court.
You think about 15, 16 years ago. Go back to Mitch Richmond, all right? Think about how Mitch played the two-guard position in the NBA. He would post you. He would play with his back to the basket. He was stronger, and he would score with his back to the basket, draw fouls. Then he could step outside and shoot threes. Then he would guard your ass off. But think about Mitch and the way he played the two-guard position. Again, now go to an AAU game. Go to any gym. Go to an AAU game, and what is it? It's bombs away. It's three-pointers, 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 three-pointers. That's why I asked. The analytics tell you, okay, yes, Shaq might be able to do the pick and roll, throw alley-oops, but the analytics are saying, well, we need more threes than we need twos. So I don't like how the game's played now, Larry. I've said this for the last couple of years. I think the game has gone overboard. And Jerry Reynolds said this to me about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and he makes so much sense. And I think the NBA needs to do this. Jerry thinks that they need to get rid of the three-point shot. In other words, where the arc stops becoming an arc and turns into a straight line. He said, remove that line, because the three in the corner is too easy. And what's happening now is a lot of teams are coming down on fast breaks and they're kicking out for an easy three-point shot. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Keep the three-point arc, but when the arc turns into a straight line to head to the baseline, remove that so that area is not a three-point shot. I think that would help out the game a lot. And Jerry mentioned that 4 or 5 years ago, and I think Jerry is spot on with that.
Let's go. Let's take that one step further. The arenas are all constructed, so this would be a very difficult thing. But people are getting bigger, and we see it in the NFL. The premium on the real estate. Yep. There's just nowhere to run. So now it's like, are you going to move guys in the run game, or are you going to try to run wide? Well, it's the same thing in basketball. What do you think of ultimately at some future date? Because it's coming at some point where they widen the floor or at least widen the lane to an international degree and try to open up the game and try to make it more, more of a passing game. And, what do you think the impact of that would be? Because right now it seems like
it's congested. It's like playing in a bread box.
Yeah, it's too small. There's not enough room.
And you could do that. Now all the arenas in the league could, I think, accommodate a wider court, a longer court. I don't think that would be an issue for the buildings in the NBA currently. We might be going to that. Again, I'll say one thing about
How about this one, Grant? How about this one? You're a big hockey fan. Yeah. What do you think of overtime in the NBA being 4-on-4?
Hey, I'll tell you one thing. I would say, and I don't like this. When overtime begins, if you're still in the game, you get an extra foul. I think that has always been a big mistake in the NBA. Now, if you foul out in regulation, you're done. But if you're still eligible to play in overtime, you should get one additional foul. I mean, teams get extra timeouts every overtime, don't they? How come that some of the best overtime games in NBA history, some of the biggest stars are watching from the bench? I hate that. I would love to see that change. I don't understand why you would expect to be playing 53 or 58 minutes and you don't get an extra foul.
Yeah, no, I think that's a hell of a point. I want to ask you one last one on the Sacramento Kings. So I read an article this morning that I couldn't believe, that the Kings, who have the 4th pick in the draft and look like they are headed towards Jaden Ivey coming towards them from the Big Ten. He's a tremendous player, incredible athlete, maybe more of a 1 than a 2. And they already have a 1. They have De'Aaron Fox, and and they've already paid Fox. That Sacramento might be entertaining trading that 4th pick to either, for a veteran or to move down in the lottery and to not go with Ivy. I don't know, man. Ivy's electric going to the hole. How sold are you on De'Aaron Fox? If the Kings, should they just take a guy like Ivy and get down the road? They also have Davion Mitchell. They've got two point guards right now who I like. But in some ways, I think they should just take Ivy and trade one of those other two guys. How do you see Sacramento's decision? They get the 4th pick, and I think it's kind of a 4-person top of the draft, to be honest.
First of all, I don't care what position Ivy plays. If he's the best player on the board, when you're the Kings who haven't made the playoffs in 16 years, you take them. That's why Luka Doncic is not on the Kings and he's on the Mavs, because they thought they had a point guard in De'Aaron Fox and they were skeptical about Luka and Fox being able to play together. Biggest mistake in franchise history. When I first got to Sacramento, they had drafted Joe Klein with the first ever pick in Sacramento. I actually got to Sacramento 2 years after that. But there was a player, you may have heard of him before. His name was Karl Malone. And the Kings really liked Karl Malone, but they didn't take Karl Malone because they had Otis Thorpe as their power forward. My experience in all drafts, and I really mean this, when you're a bad team, and Sacramento's a bad team, you don't draft for a position. You take best available player. Now, with that said, I think Monty McNair knows that he's running out of time. And if I'm Monty McNair, the Sacramento general manager, I don't want to draft a 19-year-old kid. I don't want to draft a young player who I got to wait 2, maybe 3 years to develop, where I'm not going to be the general manager of the team anymore, and he's going to help another general manager win. Me personally, because of the Kings not having a winning season in 16 consecutive years, not being in the playoffs since 2006, if it were me, I would take the 4th pick, maybe an existing player, and I would trade that to get a player that I already know can play and play pretty well in the league. As much as you love Ivy, as much as you may love Smith, as much as you may love Holmgren or Banchero, name whoever, you don't really know. Okay, there are busts made every year. I remember when the Kings took Thomas Robinson 5 instead of Damian Lillard. And what a freaking mistake that was. And Thomas Robinson was a bust. I'll tell you a real funny story. Bobby Jackson was coaching the Kings Summer League team that year. And I get to Vegas 2 days after it had started. And I go up to Bobby. I go, how's Robinson look? And he goes, he can't play. No. I go like this. I go, what do you mean he can't play? He goes, bro, I'm telling you, he can't play. I'm like, what do you mean, he's hurt? He's like, no, he can't play.
Oh,
I'm like, what do you mean? No, I said, 2 days. I go, he can't play. The hell are you talking about? He can't play. He goes, bro, I'm telling you, he can't play. And you know what? He was right. The guy was a bust. And I'm just thinking, think about Marvin Bagley. Even though the Kings made a horrible mistake, so did Phoenix and so did Atlanta. Not as bad as Sacramento, because they could have had Luka too. Okay? Marvin Bagley, the 2nd pick, no one thought he would be a bust. Nobody thought he would not be a good player, even though people thought, well, gee, the Kings blew it. They should have taken Luka. Okay, Phoenix should have taken Luka, but they had Ayton. He can play. Atlanta should have taken Luka. They got Trae Young. He can play. He's been an all-star. Who thought Marvin Bagley would be a player like this? So, Larry, if I'm Monty McNair, I want a sure thing. And a sure thing is a player that's currently playing in the NBA, that's playing at a good level, that I already know can play, as opposed to a draft pick where I think he can play, but I don't really know. And, oh, yeah, by the way, by the time that player gets good, in all likelihood, I'll be out of a job.
Yeah. I mean, when you are a team, you're one of the have-nots. Sadly, the Kings are in that spot right now. It's like only tough decisions. Only, you want this guy in the draft. Yeah, but you know what? He won't come to Sacramento to work out for you. You know what? Sometimes you got to, like Nelly had that problem with Steph. Steph and Dell told the Warriors, Larry Riley and Don Nelson, don't even bother with Steph. He ain't playing here. And they had to make a tough call. Do they take the player and just call his bluff, or do they just get down the road and take somebody else? And you know what? Getting down the road and taking somebody else doesn't work. The Warriors learned it taking a Donald Foyle over T-Mac. They learned it taking Todd Fuller over Kobe. Who cares what the player wants? You do what's best for you and call their bluff and make it happen. I'll tell you the other one, the player on Sacramento that if I'm an NBA GM, I have circled, highlighted, X'd out. He is the guy, because I'm looking at Sacramento going, they may get Ivy in the draft. Right. They already have De'Aaron Fox. Davion Mitchell probably doesn't have a home there. He's a 6-foot point guard. But I'll tell you, I think Davion Mitchell is a championship player, man. I watched Davion Mitchell this last year against Golden State in the head-to-head against Sacramento. Davion Mitchell D's you up. He's a dog on the defensive end. He'll hit big shots. He's got huge heart, tons of toughness. To me, they're going to screw that up. They're going to throw him in a deal, and they're going to lose him. He's going to wind up on some winning team, and he's going to be terrific. To me, when you watch Jalen Brunson do what he's doing for Dallas, Davion Mitchell can be as impactful as Brunson. Maybe not the exact same kind of game, but he can be as impactful as Brunson for some other team's winning program down the road. And I just get the feeling that Sacramento's they're gonna let him get out of town. He's gonna go somewhere else, and he's gonna blossom, man. I love Davion Mitchell.
I'll make a prediction right here on May 23rd, 2022, that they do not move Davion Mitchell. All right.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think he's there to stay. Now, you asked me about De'Aaron Fox. I would have traded De'Aaron Fox last year if I could have. I don't want a point guard in the NBA that can't shoot. Low 70s from the free throw line, shot 29% from three this year. He just completed his fifth year. Generally, after your fifth year, you are who you are. Okay. He is a very inconsistent shooter. I can't have a point guard in the NBA shooting in the low 70s. I can't have a point guard shooting that poorly from three. Yes, he's electric. Yes, he's fast. Oh, and by the way, he gets hurt too much. So the problem is there a general manager out there that will take De'Aaron Fox and his max contract? I wouldn't if I were a general manager, but it only takes one to make a deal. So you asked me before we got into this, what would I do with Fox? I would move Fox. I am not a fan of point guards that can't shoot. And his shot to me has been nothing but inconsistent through 5 years of his career.
Yeah. Now, hey, let's finish with this one. You and I have one thing in common. Well, we probably got a number of things in common. One of the things we have in common is we both like and enjoyed Sacramento. I'm not there. You're not there, but we both have great affinity. We have lots of friends there. My brother lives in Natomas. He works in Sac. Many of my friends from Sac State still either in the foothills or in the Sacramento general area. I love it. I love everything about it. I think it's a really underrated place. You saw a number of NBA players who got traded there, and probably their first idea of Sacramento was, this is going to suck. I cannot believe I'm here. But then, not everybody has leverage, and sometimes you got to make the best of it. And then I think what I've seen, though, is a number of players who did settle in Sac found out that, guess what? They loved it. They loved it, and they loved it for their family, and they loved the community, and they stayed, and they owned property, and they started businesses, and Vlade and Peja and Weber and so. What is your experience in that market? When you talk about that market, how do you think NBA players view it at first blush? And then you saw all those guys kind of buy houses and find places to live and warm to it. And there were a number of players that I'm sure you had conversations on bus rides and sitting around before games or after games or after practice and said, you know what, how's things going for you? You know what, Grant, I hated Sac when I got here, but man, I'm loving it now because I love this and that and this and that. What's been your experience about Sacramento? Let's talk about Sacramento for a minute.
All right, so I moved there in 87. I started doing the games in 88. I can count on one hand the number of players that did not like living in Sacramento. Now, there are two separate issues here. The franchise is different than where you live. Okay?
Sure.
The Kings have been one of the worst franchises in sports during that tenure. All right. They haven't made the playoff. I think they've made the playoffs since arriving in 85. I think they've made the playoffs a total of 10 times. Okay. A lot of the players that have retired live there, including players like Brad Miller, who's a good old country boy from Indiana. All right. He lives there. We can talk about, you mentioned a lot of the other players. Bobby Jackson, not a California guy, made his home there, is doing very well. Harold Presley, when he played there, East Coast guy.
Villanova guy from Philly, right?
Still lives there, made that his home, loved it. There are a lot of players throughout the years. And here's the other deal. When I have players on my podcast or previously on my radio show in Sacramento, retired players, we would do kind of segments, where are they now? And we would have players come on, and I would always ask them that question. And they always talked about how much they loved living in Sacramento. They like the lifestyle. It's not a big city. It's easy to get to the airport. The weather's pretty good.
Tons of golf courses.
Yes. And I'll tell you, a lot of, and you'll see, you talk to players like I do. Very few players will tell you that they did not enjoy living in Sacramento. And I would also tell you that the players that were married, their wives loved living there too. It was a great place for their kids to go to school. And it was just really, really good. There's a lot of beautiful areas, as you well know, within 20 minutes of Sacramento, like Granite Bay and Roseville and, extra 10 minutes, El Dorado Hills, there are a lot of areas that are beautiful to live in. So downtown Sacramento, no. But in the surrounding areas, pretty nice. Yeah, no. Most of the players loved living in Sacramento. Loved it. Chris Webber would tell you. I mean, if you had Chris on right now, which would be impossible because he doesn't do that, or he would tell you he would come on and then he would blow you off. But Chris would tell you he loved living in Sacramento.
Yeah. Tom Pierce says Tahoe's so close by. Yeah, you can get up to Tahoe. I'll tell you, I always loved your show up there, but the week that I loved it most was when you guys would roll up for the American Century golf tournament in July, which is an awesome tournament in Tahoe, and all these celebs roll in, and you guys were pretty much right there in your backyard, and you would do your show from up there.
The best.
Those are some phenomenal shows. I mean, there's some great. I was going to say that. Was that your favorite time of the year up there? Yeah,
no question. I mean, you just have one guest after another, then hanging out, at night with the. A lot of the
Jerry Rice, Barkley, guys having a few cocktails.
Charles is the best. I mean,
yeah,
Charles is the best. But yeah, that was the best week. Great week. But doing all those interviews, we'd be right on the driving range, and we'd just have one interview after another. And Aaron Rodgers, Emmitt Smith, Barkley. I can go on and on. I mean, it was phenomenal.
Yeah. Last question for you, and we do appreciate. We're a little over an hour. We went a little long take because we had some good topics.
It's all good.
We talked before about Kevon Looney, and Kevon Looney is like the glue piece for the Warriors. He's playing at a crazy high level. You watch that Kings team through the bad days to the great days, and then more bad days. In their greatest run, the early 2000s. Who was their Kevon Looney? Who was the guy that he wasn't? It wasn't Weber. It wasn't one of the stars. But man, looking back at that team, you said that guy was a glue piece. That guy was a guy who really kind of made the thing all kind of work. And maybe it's a player, maybe it's a coach, maybe
it was a player.
It was a player. Who was the glue piece of those teams?
Well, Vlade was the glue, but other than a starter, it was Scott Pollard. Scott
Pollard, that's a good one, huh?
Yeah. Scott was, you knew what you were going to get from Scott every single game, right? And you knew he didn't have to have the ball to be good. And he was the most physical player on the team, rebounded the hell out of the ball, played very good defense, high basketball IQ.
Played at Kansas.
Made a mistake. Yeah, I would say Scott Pollard. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Scott. Is he still in Sac or
No, he's in Carmel, Indiana. He's living in Indiana. He got traded from Sacramento to Indiana, and then
he was at the Palace. He was at the Malice in the Palace, right? Wasn't he there that night?
He was in a suit. He was not playing, and he'll talk about that. And again, one of the fun. I don't know if you would call this funny or not. I think it was on the show on Netflix, but Scott told me this well before it was ever aired. He said that he was around with Ron and Steven Jackson well after the game. And he was in front of those two guys. And he heard Ron say to Steven Jackson, he goes, "Bro, do you think we're going to get in trouble for this?" Seriously. Okay. Ron Artest asked Steven Jackson, "Bro, do you think we're going to get in trouble for this?" And Scott tells me this. Scott tells me on the airplane, he turned around and goes, "F yeah, you're going to get in trouble for this."
That is
Scott
awesome.
said, "Scott, I mean, you can't." I go, "Come on, Scott." He goes, "I heard it with my own ears." He goes, I heard Ron say that to Steven Jackson. "Bro, do you think we're going to get in trouble for this?" And real quickly, I know.
That is beautiful.
Real quickly, I will say this. I've met a lot of phenomenal people in my years of covering the NBA. Ron Artest is one of my favorite guys. He's got a heart the size of any arena. He's just a gentle giant. Yeah, he's done some stupid things on the court. Yes, he got suspended. But you cannot meet a nicer, kinder, just well-intended person than Ron Artest. I love the guy.
He lived in Loomis, right? Didn't he have a place in Loomis?
Yes.
So a couple, we'll hit the chat and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. But Miria, 49er Faithful, great show, fellas. Appreciate all the insight as always. A couple people up here talking about Sacramento. Celts Chronicles said, I lived in Antelope for a couple years. The rivers by Folsom Lake, love it up there. A lot of people loving Sacramento for sure. Couple people down here in the chat had some good comments here that I thought, Kevin F says, this is my favorite show in Krueg's lineup. Hope you guys keep it going. I have to say, this is my favorite as well. I look forward to our conversations on Monday. This is kind of interesting. From Oben E2 says, my biggest pet peeve with living in Sacramento is that the Warrior games are blocked out on cable. That always was my argument as well, Grant. Now, obviously, you wanted everybody to be able to watch you because you were doing the Kings. But let's be honest. The Warriors were out here for decades before the Kings showed up in the late 80s in Sacramento. And the Warriors, Sacramento is a Bay Area adjunct market, and those were Warrior fans there. It almost is like each person should be able to say, hey, I live here, but I want Warriors, or I live here, but I want Kings. I don't know. There are probably Kings fans who lived in Sac and now live in the Bay Area, and maybe they still want to watch their Kings, but they're in Warrior market and the opposite. To me, it should be like check a box and be able to get what you want because, that's when the Kings showed up in Sac, the only animosity that Warrior fans have for the Kings is that they couldn't watch the Warriors anymore on TV because of the blackout restrictions.
Obviously, that has been changed over the years with the NBA League Pass, but yes, it costs money, so I get that. But it is what it is. It is what it is. I wish that, especially, who the hell wants to watch the Kings now anyway, right?
Exactly.
No, I mean, seriously, they've been so bad for so long.
How does Vivek do it in Atherton?
NBA League Pass. Right?
He can afford it.
Yeah, he can afford it. I think so. Yeah.
Grant, awesome stuff, man. We love rapping with you. Tell people about your podcast and where they can find it and what other things you're doing these days.
Yeah, if you go to my website, ifyoudon'tlikethat.com, all my work is on there. My podcasts come out Tuesdays and Fridays every day at 3 o'clock Pacific. I'm on an app called Listen App. It's basically like a radio show. That's going very well. And then generally on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not every Tuesday and Thursday, but most, like tomorrow, I do a show on No Filter Network with Sean Salisbury, nofilter.net. We have a lot of fun on that. That's normally at 2 o'clock Pacific. So I got a lot of different things. I'm trying to be like Larry Krueger. Every time I go on I swear, every time I'm on social media, I'm going, Larry's going on now. Larry's going on now. I'm like, Jesus, do you have a life? I mean, you're on after every Giants game, after every Warriors game. I'm thinking, God, does his family ever see him? You're always doing this, man.
Yeah, seriously. If I didn't have a home studio, I would never see them. But, I'll tell you one thing that's great about this is that the ability, because I did have my son play JV baseball, and I saw every single game because I could schedule these things around the game. And, when you can do that and you can sit there and be like, hey, you know what? My kid's going to be a sophomore in high school one time. It's like great. It's been a great year. Hey, my man, love rapping with you. Have a terrific rest of the week. We'll talk to you next week.
You got it, buddy.
Grant Napear, everybody.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Careful, whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah. We ain't never fall back.